Alright, so last video we focused on the degrees of the unit circle. Now we're going to focus on the radians of the unit circle. This is going to be exciting. So, similar to before with the degrees where I kind of sliced up the circle, here I'm giving you a better visualization of that, right? So here's our circle, but I took out some of the lines that we saw yesterday. So if we look at this circle, how many total sections have I cut the circle up into? Give you a minute to think about it. What do you see? Alright, very good. We got 8 sections. Okay, so in radians, what is the distance of one lap around a circle? Or if we were to spin one time around a circle, around in a circle, what would that measure be in radians? Anyone? Very good, 2 pi. Excellent. You guys are spot on today. Last one. What is the, so let's take this into account. If it's 2 pi to spin around the circle once, and I have 8 sections here, what is the angle measure then in radians of each section? Very good. Pi over 4. Looks like a 4-year-old wrote that. Alright, so what that tells me then is each one of these is an angle of pi over 4. What does that mean? Okay, well again we're going to start here, right, where this is 0. 0 radians now, but still 0. So I know this measure is pi over 4. That should make sense because notice this is the segment that's bisecting the first quadrant. That was 45 degrees, and we also saw in the previous video that 45 degrees and pi over 4 radians are the same angle measure. If this is 1 pi over 4, and this is another pi over 4, that means that this is 2 pi over 4, but that reduces, so this is actually pi over 2. And if this is another pi over 4, then that's 1, 2, 3 pi over 4. So this is 3 pi over 4, and I'm just going to relabel this one. This was pi over 4. And if I go again, this is, oh my god, how is this happening? 4 pi over 4, but that reduces, and that's pi. And we can keep going around the circle like this, right? Because each one of these is pi over 4, so we're just counting pi over 4s. A couple of things to point out before we continue. Also, remember we did see also yesterday that 90 degrees is pi over 2, and we know that 180 degrees is pi. So I want you to finish up filling out this circle for just these segments. So pause the video, do that, unpause when you're ready to check. Alright, so we should hopefully get these angles. That the next segment is going to be 5 pi over 4, then the next one is going to be 3 pi over 2, and then 7 pi over 4, and then 2 pi. And again, I'm getting that because I just keep adding pi fourths. So if this was 4 pi over 4, this is 5 pi over 4, this becomes 6 pi over 4, but I can reduce that to 3 pi over 2, then 7 pi over 4, and then 8 pi over 4, but that reduces to 2 pi, which it should because I know that all the way around the circle is 2 pi radians. Perfect. So these segments we can use. We know those. Those aren't going to change. Alright, let's see what happens here. So now we're going to draw in the lines for the 30 and the 60 degree reference angles. This time we're going to ignore the 45 degrees. So I've got this, and I got this, I got this, and I got this, and this, and this, and this, whoa, and that. Very good. Nice work, team. Moving on. Now we're going to look at those. So these are those same line segments. Back to the questions before. How many sections do we see this time? Wait, there's more lines, Mr. Rumpt. How do I do this? Good question. Well, divide or count. Just count, actually. Yeah, probably just count. So we have 12 sections. Excellent. Next question, radians. What is the distance of one lap around the circle or one revolution? We know that that is 2 pi. So, big $1,000,000 question. Not really. What is the angle measure of each section then? If the total angle measure is 2 pi for one time around, and I have 12 total sections, what do I get? I get pi over 6 because 2 pi divided by 12 is pi over 6. Very good. So, let's begin to label these. I know that this is still 0. And then I know that this is pi over 6. So this angle is pi over 6. This here is also pi over 6. So now I have 2 pi over 6, which is pi over 3. And then here, this is another pi over 6. So this is 3 pi over 6, but I already know that's pi over 2. And so I want you to now, again, continue on around the circle, labeling these angles. Pause the video, unpause when you're ready to check the entire circle. So I want you to finish this with the pi 6 angles, and then we're going to look at the complete circle together. So that's what we're going to look at when you unpause. So try to do that. Pause the video. You got this. I believe in you. You're the best. Go. Okay, so here are the angles. All, the entire unit circle. Oh, it's magical, right? Okay, so just to continue on, if you were confused on that, so I know that this was another pi 6, and then pi 6, and then pi 6, right? So if this was 3 pi 6, then this was 4 pi 6, which is 2 pi over 3. Then if I add pi 6 again, this is 5 pi over 6. This is 6 pi over 6, but I know that that's pi. And so I continued on, and the next one would have been 7 pi over 6. We would have skipped this because we already did the pi fourths. So this next one would here have been 8 pi over 6, but instead we reduced that to 4 pi thirds. Then this would be 9 pi over 6, but we know that's 3 pi over 2. Then 10 pi over 6, which is 5 pi over 3. We skip the pi fourths, so we go right here to 11 pi over 6. And then all the way around is 12 pi over 6, which we know is 2 pi. Take it all in. Let it soak in. I mean, that's good. That's beautiful. So those are the special angles in radians on the unit circle. They're the same locations as what we did with the degrees. They're just labeled in radians. It's nice, right? So, what are the strategies you can use to memorize and understand the special angles on the unit circle in degrees? We talked about that already. So, the answer is understand the reference angles. And so remember I talked about with reference angles, whoa, that is bad. This is one reason why they are so important, is they help us really understand a lot in trig. And we know that these reference angles here are 30 degrees, 45 degrees, and 60 degrees. So then when we ask the question, what are the strategies we can use to memorize and understand the special angles on the unit circle and radians? The answer is the same. Understand the reference angles. In radians, the reference angles are pi over 6, pi over 4, and pi over 3. Nice work.